What is going on YouTube? Carter here with Edged Mindset. We're going to be taking a look at this knife right here, this knifey knife. We're looking at the ADV Pitboss 2 Fun Mamma Jamma. This thing is so cool. It's a little obnoxious. I know it's not for everybody. It's arguably not for me, but there's something about it. It's just so much fun. We're going to talk about it. This is a very large, it has a lot of cool things going for it though. And that's what I want to try to illustrate with this knife. You may see this and think it's really cool. You may see this and be like, that is obnoxious and ridiculous. But it has some really cool stuff going on with this knife, and that's what I want to talk about. So this is made by Andre de Villiers. He is a South African knife maker. He's been around for a long time. I remember he did a butcher, I think it maybe was called Butcher Cleaver like 9 years ago. That was pretty popular and pretty cool. And he's kind of been plugging along ever since. I would consider this, it's a production knife. However, it's a kind of bespoke production, right? He doesn't crank knives out. He doesn't have a lot of avenues to pick them up. They'll show up at Knife Center or some retailers here or there. For the most part, though, you reach out to him. Follow him on Facebook, ADV Tactical, Andre de Villiers. I forget what exactly his handle is on there, but he posts stuff, and if you want it, you reach out to him and say, hey, I'm interested in it, and you guys talk about what it is you want on the knife, and then, figure out how to get it to you, and that kind of thing. They are relatively affordable. That is a very relative, I said relative twice. That is a very subjective thing, right? $300 to one person's a good price. To another person, that's insane. But I consider, with what you're getting, I consider these to be reasonably priced. They're between like $300 and $400 for a very large knife. Decent steel. I cannot speak to his heat treat, the quality, that kind of thing, but in terms of what it's labeled as and what you get here, there's titanium in here, there's bearings, all kinds of cool stuff. I think it's reasonably priced. On the secondary market, you can get this for around $300 any day of the week, less if you negotiate, or the seller's really wanting to move, or maybe if it's got some wear and things like that. Second disclaimer, you're like, wait a minute, Carter, you didn't say first disclaimer. I know, that's what I do. Throw curveballs. Difficult to follow what I'm saying. My brain moves 3 times faster than my mouth, and I complete sentences in my head, and you guys are like, I don't know what you're talking about. I know. Between that and the gloves, really limiting my capabilities here on YouTube. But the other thing I want to point out is these serrations, I believe, are aftermarket. I don't think this is done by ADV. I think somebody sent this in to get these done. They are super wicked and cool. In fact, that's really what made me pull the trigger on this, is these serrations. And at the time, I didn't know. When I bought it, I didn't know if these were stock or aftermarket. But since I purchased it, I've looked into it. ADVs don't have a lot of serrations. The ones that I do find are very kind of traditional machined serrations. This is obviously more done on a small belt grinder. You see similar things with Mick Strider custom knives when he does serrations are like this. But luckily, they're done extremely well. They're very uniform. All the peaks and valleys are all even. Extremely sharp. Really well done. No discoloration from overheating. So very happy about that. Let's do a quick size comparison. What do I have close by? Not a lot. This is a large knife. It's like 4.25 inches compared to an S&G. If I could actually put it in frame, it's like, you idiot. You can see how much bigger it is. It's very large. You can see in my hand, I've got pretty large hands, and I got these stupid gloves on. And so very big, very good for gloved hands. Very nice, very nice. Let's do measurements real quick. Measurements. So overall length, I believe, is like a little over 10. No, about, like 10 and an eighth. So about 10 inches. 4.5, actually, inch blade. So very big. Very nice, very nice. Let's do a weight on here, because for its size, the weight is quite reasonable, in my opinion. 7 ounces for a knife this size, I think is quite good. Materials. We've got a very finely bead blasted blade. It is S35VN. It's got a spider hole opening. We'll talk about that here in a minute. It's got a flipper tab. And then it's got some embellishments. I really like this gear pattern around that spider hole. Looks really cool. This is really just for looks, although you can actually use it kind of to open the knife if you want to. It is a little bit of an opening ricasso. No, not ricasso. Opening fuller. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. Fuller. It's on both sides. Very sharp, at least this one is. I assume this is factory edge, but due to the aftermarket work, maybe it's not. Maybe it's been sharpened after. You have a hollow ground right here, so it is compound ground, flat grind up at the front. Very useful shape, really cool. You've got some marbled carbon fiber scales on both sides, which look really cool. Titanium liners, titanium backspacer, titanium milled pocket clip. I know some of the earlier versions of this, the pocket clip had one screw holding it in place, and so it would actually move. This one has two. I'm assuming this is a fix by Andre de Villiers, but bear in mind, it could also be maybe an aftermarket modification along with the serrations too. So I can't confirm that it's been updated to take two screws. Maybe that's been done after the fact. So take that with a grain of salt. This has multiple deploy methods, which make it really cool. So it's got a flipper, works really well. When we're talking about flippers and button locks, it's a little bit different. You can see the detent has a much larger scope of operation than your traditional ball. And that also means you're not going to get that kind of crisp let off like you would get with a traditional ball detent in a liner lock or a frame lock. It is going to be a little mushier on the brake. However, no issues flipping it, but it is pretty easy to fail if you want to. So you do, if you want a real powerful flip, you got to kind of light switch this and it'll work great. But even if you just kind of pull it down, it'll open up fine. It is running on bearings, so super, super smooth, opens really well. And like I said, that's just a byproduct of a button lock. It is what it is. You can't really get around that. The only way to make this flip, quote unquote, better would be as if it wasn't a button lock, and then that's no fun. The other way to open, like I mentioned, is the fuller here, or the hole, the Spidey hole. Now, as mentioned by Metal Complex, it is really frustrating that the hole is covered up by this finger choil. It would be pretty easy to tame these down and open that up a little bit. But even if you just tame these down, it's still going to cover some of that hole. You'd really have to completely change this whole shape and just have it cut all the way down in order to have this hole completely open. But as it stands right here, it's functional. Even in these big gloves, you know, I can get my thumb in there and open it. But it is a little weird because you hit this peak right there, and it is kind of like, was that an afterthought or what? The other opening method is the button lock. You can, and it's difficult in front of the camera, but you can kind of gravity it open, just how you close it, and open it that way as well. Now this features a locking mechanism. Slide this up, you can't press the button. Slide this up, you can't press the button, you can't open it. I don't like it. I wish it didn't have it. There's no reason for it. The only reason it's on there is it's so easy to do because of how this mechanism works, because of how this button pushes a plunger, which acts as the close detent and it acts as the lock. All this does is slides a piece of metal underneath here into that button, so you can't press the button. Don't press the button, nothing works. If you notice when you open it, see how the button sucks in? Because it is directly attached to the plunger. And so if you prevent that button from being able to move in, you prevent the plunger from moving, you prevent the knife from opening, you prevent the knife from closing. So in that respect, it is kind of cool how such a simple device can completely lock this knife open or closed. However, it's just not needed, right? And I think most people would agree. What are your options there? Well, you can take this apart and you can remove this button. You're going to have a little open tab right here with a little hole. You can also open this up and there's just a set screw on this other side. You can crank it down so that this really isn't movable. Now it is a good lock. It's got a very positive click. You know, it doesn't really open by accident per se, but it is kind of annoying. I wish it wasn't there. I don't know if they offer model without it. I don't think that they do. I think it kind of comes with it. So it is so much fun. Having a button lock in such a large knife is just so much fun. It's like a guillotine. It's super smooth on the bearings. Like I said, if you don't have working in a framed camera, it is way easier to play with. You get that cool ting from opening and closing. It sounds really cool. It is so much fun to play with such a large knife. That's a button lock. And he did it well. They did it well. So let's talk about the bads. You know, aside from if this just isn't your thing, right? Obviously, if you're like, yeah, I don't need a giant tactical knife. Just not my thing. I get that. Aside from that, you know, what are the things that bug me on here? Well, it's a little much. The aesthetic, and this kind of is Andre de Villiers. I don't dig it too much. It's kind of like a circuit board type thing. You know, you've got all these geometric shapes. Most of them are there just to fill space. You know, it just seems like he's like, I just can't have this be smooth. I've got to put little doodads in here. I don't care for it too much. Some people may really like it. I wish this scale was just smooth, you know, or at least mostly smooth. Maybe, I don't know, like this stuff, it's just too much going on. I don't know. I don't really like it. Same with this pocket clip, like all this milling, all this, just normal pocket clip for me, please. And what I would prefer is to take the effort that it took to do all this milling. I do like this, like the chamfering's good. That's good. Keep that. Everything else, ditch it. And let's knock down the shininess of the hardware and these liners, man. These are some shiny titanium, and I'm still in that mindset of shininess is tricky. It often looks cheap. If it's done right, it doesn't. But a lot of the time, it just makes it look kind of cheap. And to me, that's kind of what this looks like. You know, some of this shininess, like just bead blast it. Man, if all this, or sandblast, it would be even better. If all this hardware was just sandblasted or PVD coated, make it all black. Get rid of this fuller, knock this guy down. I think this could actually be, you know, and Andre can do what he wants, but I think this could actually be a real big contender for like making some major waves. But I think some of these aesthetic choices and design choices kind of keep a lot of people away from not just this knife, but his in general. They all look very similar to this, right? They all kind of have this aesthetic and this design language. And, you know, he can do what he wants. He's been in business for a long time. He's probably doing fine. But if he did those things, man, I really think ADV could blow things out of the water. The other thing too, when we're talking about nitpicking design stuff, he uses a lot of like weird fonts, like Comic Sans kind of stuff, like this Pitboss here. It's like a serif font, but it's not solid. He also tends to like just stick names wherever. Like they always seem like somebody else did that, right? Like he designed the knife and then he sent it to marketing and marketing just threw the name somewhere. Most of the time, the fonts are questionable and look weird, and where he puts the naming looks weird. A nice, simple sans serif, small font right here. ADV, Pitboss 2, maybe just going this way, you know, perpendicular to the blade. But instead, he kind of does weird stuff with that, and he's got, and I wouldn't say it's billboarded. It's not like it's too much writing. It's just kind of odd and weird kind of design choices. But I think that kind of carries throughout the whole knife. I think those kind of choices, those little kind of off choices where things just don't quite gel all the way, kind of make its way through the whole knife. But like I said, at the price point, what you're getting, it's so much fun. Like it is, you hold this thing and you're like, wow, that's actually way lighter than I thought. It's well made, good materials. Like I said, I can't speak to the heat treat, but the materials that they're labeling it as for the cost is great. And he's doing cool things with like the button locks and a lot of different models. You can get some customization on there, so it's pretty cool. So that's it, guys. Quick look, ADV. Actually, not so quick look, ADV Pitboss 2.